Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this fireside chat with Keywords Studios. Thanks everybody for joining the call. My name is Nick Stockman. I run the equity sales team at Numis, and with me today I have Bertrand Bodson and Jon Hauck of Keywords. Thank you very much, guys, for joining the call. Just a couple of points of note to start with. So all lines are muted already, but if you do have a question that you want to relay during the call, then please do so via email to me. It was on the invitation, but n.stockman@numis.com. I think we've got a pretty clear framework of what we want to discuss on the call, but I will certainly try to incorporate questions that fall outside of that when they come through to me. We're going to aim to try and wrap this up in 45 minutes, give or take. Yeah, let's get cracking. So I think just to kind of kick things off, Bertrand, I think there are quite a lot of people on the call, probably with varying degrees of familiarity with the business. So perhaps we just want to take a couple of minutes to give a quick overview of the Keywords story before we get into the wider topics.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you, Nick, for having us, and thank you to all of you as well for joining the call. I realize this is a topic with a lot of interest, but also wanted to take the opportunity to thank the many of you who have been on the journey with us for some time. We are the leading global B2B service solution provider into the gaming space and more into media and entertainment. Essentially, we are a mix of technology and service platform for the industry. We are very privileged to get to work for 24 of the top 25 publishers in the world, including 10 of the top 10 on the mobile space. I think that's important, Nick, because it gives us a strong vantage point as well for what we're going to discuss in terms of what is happening across the industry. Essentially, we have about 12,000 talent across the world, I would say with very, very strong tech capability. I'm sure we'll cover that. And three big divisions that we call Create, Globalize, and Engage. Create is about 4,000 technology talents spread across 24 studios since this morning, since we're very grateful to welcome the team at the Hartwood Lab. Really pure engineering, hardcore development, typically co-development, even full-on stack development alongside our partners, plus technical artists. Globalize is all about a platform, so it's really a highly scalable platform that allows to bring the titles to market in terms of testing, in terms of localization across 35 plus languages, and an end. And eventually, when a title is ready to go, how do we effectively mobilize and engage with the 3 billion players around the planet, or at least hundreds of millions of players? A lot of fandom on that front, and we're building their sort of mini Keywords. We've been at it for the last 3 years. You've seen some of the more recent moves there, going all the way from how can we do in cinematic, in-game capture, high-end trailers to influencer marketing, including a lot of tech underlying that to support that, to send actually the right influencers and the right community management to the right players and the right audience, all the way to trust and safety and player support, player engagement. And I'm sure we'll talk about the tech that underpins that. There is a bias in what we do that tends to be, we serve the entire industry, but that really tends to bias towards AAA, with probably the very sharp end of the technical and technology challenge that are at hand there. A few numbers, if helpful, is we are roughly 3 times the size of the next player into a space from an end-to-end point of view. But at the same time, we're still only 6% of the market share in the 12 billion of externalized service provision that happens there. So that gives a sense, and probably my sense of excitement, of how much there is for the taking ahead of us. And a lot of it is organic, but we also have a lot of levers, as you know, on the M&A front, which helps us as well build the right capability where we have gaps and accelerate certainly some of the things that we're going to talk about today as well.
Perfect. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. So yeah, we three last sat down and did one of these talks a little over a year ago in February last year, and we talked quite a lot of the time about instilling a tech mindset across the business, as well as making investments in the platform in that regard. Can we just talk about the progress that you've made on that front in the intervening period?
Sure, you're right. We really went on stage in exactly a year ago at the CMD, at the Capital Markets Day, where we showcased our plans. I think technology was a key component of that, as you remember, Nick. But in truth, it started earlier. It really started personally from my very first day in 2021, when joining the business. We decided to really push the accelerator with Jon, with the team, with our top 50 leaders across the business on technology. I said at the time, and I think this is probably more relevant than ever, that we wanted to double the business, but without having to double in terms of headcounts and in terms of talents, but really using technology at the core to be able to scale our platform and scale our business. I think we've been executing on that. Hopefully we'll be able to showcase some of that, but pretty strongly. In truth, we didn't wait. We all this started, probably you've seen some of the example 10 years ago. I would like to remind everybody as well that we have an army of 4,000 technologists on the pitch as well, across especially the Create Studios, incredible tech capabilities as well, deep understanding of the engine, often even before the engines, whether it's an Unreal, Epic, or Unity or other proprietary engine come live on that. So there's a lot of technology blood. We've also made some moves from a mix of talent as well. Dan McCormick has joined us as Chief Digital and Information Officer. We're very proud that Jamie Campbell, that some of you have known pretty much since the early days, who was leading our Create division, our game dev division, has accepted to take the lead on the innovation lab, effectively looking at all the products that we're building across our studios and effectively going and scale that. He will play a big role into what is to come on technology more broadly, but also on generative AI going forward. I myself am coming, Nick, if you remember from a tech background, I was at Amazon over 20 years ago. Got the chance to launch platforms like what is now called Amazon Prime Video, and for the last decade I've been deeply embedded or leading fairly large-scale digital transformation. So a mix of all of this, but probably what is most important to me is the tech ability and capabilities of our talent, how we've been building those teams, and also how we've been deploying capital to effectively pursue that quite strongly, and certainly with a strong acceleration of the last 18 months. So expect more from us in the years to come.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. And so just, I guess, to kind of dig in a bit further, obviously, and one of the reasons for the call today, is clearly the sort of the volume on the topic of kind of AI, generative AI, has risen sort of significantly in recent weeks and months, and on a variety of different businesses and industries, but certainly including your own. Maybe let's just dig into kind of where we are today with AI. And where we think it's going in terms of the impact that you can see on the industry.
Yeah, I think we're spending a lot of time on this. We even have a summit with our top 50 leaders next week dedicated to that in Montreal as well, where we've been looking at it service line per service line. But if I step back for a moment before getting, I hope, really I want to go into the specifics of it. That's what really matters. But net, we see it as a very strong positive for us. Quite frankly, we view that as something we absolutely want to embrace. This is not new to us. Technology has been something that is, again, a core pillar that we have. But step back for a second and look at the main problem that our industry has, especially on the video game side, and I would argue on the M&E side. It's like, to some extent, there has been a massive race to the top over the last few years in terms of what Jon calls a race to the top, the type of content that is needed more and more. And the main issue that we've had is like we've been short of talent. So we have a massive gap between supply and demand. We've talked about that on previous stages as well, prior to that, to be able to cast the type of content, the type of creative design, the type of quality of the games that effectively the publishers wants to get to market. Look at the cost that is taking games more and more to get them over the line. So we play a key role in that. I think we've been a key partner in that. We're really joined at the hip with many of our partners. So I think if you take for an industry as a whole, I think this is an incredible force for good. I think it's a big part of the answer that we absolutely need to unlock to be able to take that on. Maybe an invitation for everyone. We've been mining some data, and maybe we'll share that in due time, but an invitation from everyone is actually to map. We went back 20 years and certainly over the last decade. And when you look at every single one of the technology jumps that have happened basically in our space and correlate that with the level of content and the level of talent, resources, technology that has been needed to be able to take that on and the budget associated to that, it's a very, very interesting picture. And you can do it across all of the service lines. It's actually really, really striking. Take very specifically, if you want to simplify, take Unreal 1 to Unreal 5 or all the way to 5.2 right now, and you look at the cost indeed per titles to get those over the lines. You look at the type of resources that we've been able to deploy on the back of it, and probably even the extent of the shortage that we've had. Again, it's a very compelling picture to see on that. So all in all, in abstract term, I would say we see two main roles for that. The first one, it's an incredible productivity tool for us. It's a superpowers to a lot of our talent. You're going to see it without hesitation being deployed in a lot of our own internal processes, in our own internal workflows as such, so that effectively this can be a source of efficiency, a source of insight, and our talent really had the creative juice. And secondly, we also have made quite a few moves on the product side, very specifically, which have a very different type of approach, I think way more scalable to take on some of those challenges. So I'm quite excited as well by the products we've been building.
Should we just dig into that a bit more on the product side? Because I know there are some examples you cited before. For example, at the CMD last year. So maybe just to bring some of that to life, showing where you're utilizing AI in the business already, and where you've been investing to expand that product set.
Yeah, I think that's where the rubber really hits the road. So let me use a bit of time, Nick, on that, if you don't mind, to take 3 very specific products that we've been building across. I'm sure many are wondering, across many of the service lines. So I'm going to try to use a broad range to illustrate what we have to, and to be as concrete as we can. The first one that we've talked about exactly a year ago was KantanStream, or KantanAI. If you remember, that's in the localization space. The request came originally started from a customer lens, really came from Microsoft. At the time, with their exam question was keywords, anybody who would be able to effectively do localizations, translations into less than 48 hours, which had never been done before. We had that brief many times. Those are big volume, we knew it, but we'd never been able to get anywhere close to below 5 days in the world of a lot of spreadsheet, in a lot of networks of linguists to be managed, with little probably the power of technology and AI behind that. So we happened to have quite a business a few years ago called Kantan. In fairness, and Jon knows it well, we hadn't necessarily done much with it, but with incredible talent behind that. I'm very fortunate that, and you've seen at the CMD some of our talent and service line directors as well, including Romina, for example. You may remember Tony O'Dale as well, who ran Kantan. They joined force, and it's full credit goes to them to say, look, how can we think differently about this? And they looked at Kantan, what can we do with Stream in particular, and they took that in earnest. This was only an idea a year ago when we were on stage. We took the risk to share that. We just only signed a preliminary intent to go and work on a few titles, hopefully getting to 15 titles. Fast forwarding a year, just maybe to share a few stats. We're now live. We shared at the end of year results that we're live on 22 titles. Glad to announce now that we're live on 28 titles across 35 languages. On average execution time to get full cycle, average execution time on 32 hours to be able to do the full cycle. We have done over the last year alone, we've done 30 million effective translations on the back of it, word translations. We're taking on 3,000 jobs, 3,000 projects every single week on the back of it. And now we have a network of 700 linguists that are effectively tapping, that are not necessarily on our book. Our books is really the product managers using KantanStream to be able to take all that stream, to stream all the workflows basically away, when now it's one single workflow between Microsoft and ourselves. Very proud as well that Microsoft was a perfect partner for us, because they helped us co-invest in that. We both put sweat equities, investment into that to make that work. We're at the stage now where I can share that we're also deploying, just in process of deploying the Kantan MT piece of it, on which we're looking at now upgrading the out-of-the-box engines to our own engine, or are performing better, so we don't like-for-like comparison, on 77% of the type of languages that we want to take on. So we're working on the rest of the 23%. We're still early stage on that, but quite confident that we can pull that off. More importantly, the exam question to me, to the team, has been great that we have this, but how do we roll that out now? And especially on Stream, so KantanStream now, we've mapped 29 clients that we think would effectively benefit from that, where there is effectively that type of need. That's where it starts from, of which we have 5 priority ones on which we are thinking about the go-to-market to really execute on that. And a lot of it can even be done now internally in our own workflows, and Jon may be able to share a bit more about the economics. One more point on Kantan, which is high level on the economics of it. Of course, we want that P&L to look right? There will be a lot of questions, I'm sure, about the economics of it. And we're looking at that very closely. We're getting very close to be able to get the same profit margin as we were having on the regular side of our business already right now, with plenty of levers that we can utilize in terms of type of languages we're taking on. There's variation in terms of cost profitability as part of it. More importantly, imagine that as soon as we start scaling that, the type of margin that this can command. And as a reminder, this is not a replacement from one to the other. This is purely incremental business that none of us in the industry were able to tap in before, and hopefully as well with a good customer satisfaction before. The second example I'll take is Mighty. I think it's fair to say that Jon is incredibly excited by this. I am as well, but we're driving that pretty hard internally. Mighty Games is in the space of QA, or dev QA, development QA. And there again, if I take the exam question, is one of the issues we have in the industry is we often do the development, think about AAA titles, incredibly complex, and often you end up a long time later, even up to a couple of years later, where you pass it on to a testing team afterwards, with the realization of almost praying about what's the level of quality of my code associated. This isn't right. Think about DevOps in any other type of industry. We had to take that on one way or the other. MIT enables us to do that. They started that journey 10 years ago, so it's not new to them. As an anecdote, they started as well on using light models as well, which we call shallow models, shallow learning, which is very interesting because they actually didn't go in LLMs right away. They went into models where actually you didn't necessarily need a lot of data, but you need very, very precise data to be able to make it work, way less consuming as well in terms of bandwidth and in terms of cost that it takes. And they were smart enough to add the proper APIs so that when LLM comes out, high efficient, you can start tapping into those, including some of the open source. We all talk about OpenAI. There are a lot of open source models as well that could be interesting to plug into that. So we are looking at all of that right now. I'm excited by that because that changes the game. It means you can come next to the devs. You can start getting insight almost real time, almost overnight, by giving a sense of what the quality of your code. Essentially what it does, it's even very visual. It autoplays itself, where you get to see, let's say on a racing game, you get to see a car, you get to see where the road is, you get to see where the trees are, you get to see the opponents, you get to see the other cars, multiplayers, the basics of the dynamic, at least the physics of the game itself, but you get to see immediately, including with some insights of who codes best, less well, to see some of the dynamic associated to that. Where are we at with this? We acquired the company a bit more than 6 months ago, was exclusively on Unity at the time, which is important, but was clearly a limiting factor. I love the fact that we had a studio called Snowden out of Ottawa that you know, that took the brief into Create to say, look, how do we unleash and to remove the dependency on the engine itself? So they managed to create an API layer to be totally independent of the engine. We think now we have even cracked the code of being able to make it a proprietary engine for some of our clients, including some very old engines, which will be important because those are also more buggy. And effectively, they've taken that on. We announced at GDC and we showed a demo on Unreal to be able to do that with some good conversations happening with clients. We don't, and part of it will be the go-to-market. I don't want to oversell. We're really in the early stage of that as well. But the advantage we have is we have 24 creative studios. So that's where we decided to start. And we do co-dev with our clients. So we have 2 studios right now, Tantalus and Snowden, who took that on, including with some clients. But internally, as part of doing, as we do co-dev, as part of doing DevQ, as part of our processes, how do we showcase the power of that? I think that will be the best way to effectively go to market because you eat your own pudding as part of that. And I'll take a third one, which is Helpshift, that is probably a bit more known because we talked about it more recently on the back of the acquisition of Helpshift. That's more in the domain of player support. One of the frustrations that many of our partners had, I think we have incredible player support, player engagement team. We have added trust and safety, GDPR compliance. I think a real comprehensive package on that front, very specialized into gaming, understanding the gaming dimension. Think about the top spenders, top influencer in your network. You really want to be close and understand that compared to maybe some more holistic players across multiple industry. But one of the weaknesses we had, and acknowledging that ourselves, was there are many tickets where you're in-game as a player, in-app. Why would you wait for 2-3 hours, if not in some case days, before your tickets get resolved and you can continue your experience? That's not right. So that's where technology comes in. That's where we were very convinced by Helpshift. We've been working with them already for a couple of years. And kudos there go to the head of service line director, really acknowledged that, took that on, built a partnership, tested it at angst. And now we think that we can take 30 to 40%, probably 30% of the tickets away real time. The real magic there is that underneath Helpshift, you have a CRM. And that's where we plug in into the CRM, where we can say, this is Nick or this is John, a top 3 spender or an influencer in the network. Don't necessarily use the automated route, but in that case, use a highly personalized route, white glove services, VIP services, where you send the right agent that can be dedicated to be an agent, as opposed to being a sort of embryo of many things at the same time as part of it. And by the way, we're starting to use Kantan to also do machine translation in our own backend to automate our processes to get the advantage of more pairing of languages. So forgive me, I'm going a little bit long on those, but I think they are important illustrations of the reality of what we have been working on. If you step back a little bit from that, with several more examples that we're developing, we'll talk about them when we're at the F-side as well next week. Will be all about how do we make the maximum chance to succeed, to keep scaling. And importantly, behind that, I want to build a product team. So how do we build a product organization? Jon did a count actually, I think this week, where we've now over 150 product and dev engineers dedicated to our product team already. So in fairly little time, when you think about it, with some incredible talent, Tony O'Dale, for example, the Helpshift team, Eric and team really jumps to mind on that front. So that's what we've been up to.
Bertrand, just one thing to also mention there is we're also able to start joining up and interlinking some of these products. So you mentioned using Kantan machine translation to be able to provide effectively multilingual support from English contact centers. But we've also linked up the Mighty Game solution with our XLOC solution on the LQA side, which is an incredibly powerful way of effectively presenting a visual map of an entire game, showing all of the different language aspects in the game, so that rather than one of our localization testers having to play the game to find all of these different menus and all these different things, you can actually go straight there. So that's a really good example of, by bringing the product teams together, we've been able to interlink those products and make them more powerful.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, I've had a question in about sort of the use of sort of common behaviors and common products across the studio structure, but we'll kind of come to that later on. But that's really helpful in terms of those examples in those three sort of business lines of sort of localization, testing, support. I guess just to sort of build on that a bit, you know, when you're thinking about the threat or opportunity that AI presents, you know, when you think across the service lines, where do you currently think the impact could be the greatest? And what do you think about in that regard, and where do you focus your efforts? Clearly, you've just given us three good examples, but perhaps enables us to build out more on those and to expand into the other service lines as to where you think of the AI impact.
Yeah, happy to talk about any of those. I'll probably start, John, but that's exactly the lens we're taking. We're looking at it for each of the service line per service line, but then on the whole more broadly. I think just to re-emphasize a bit on those three, Helpshift came exactly on the back of that. Was like, how do we have a really compelling proposition from a player engagement point of view? It's not just player support, it's not just agents, it's really the mix of technology, the mix of talent. How do you get really a full solution effectively that can serve clients? So part of it was also acknowledging, like, look, how do we need to get in that space, we need to be ahead of that quite strongly. You can probably see where data, and I hope we'll get to talk about data as well, and where AI comes into that space. I think the Mighty example is a good example where we're trying to shift the game completely in the way we think about even testing. And when you think about there, the big question that we have in the back of our mind is, you have more and more publishers, and we've talked about that, we're starting to think about, how do I really need to have testing on my books? Is that really a priority area that I need to have? So you'll have, if you take an horizon in the next couple of years, you'll have quite a few moves as well of moving from fixed cost to variable cost. So we needed to think differently to be able to, if you want to take 1,000 testers at a time, you need to think very differently, and that's where technology comes in. And Kantan, I hope, brings it to life as well in partnership with Microsoft. Another big one that is probably on everybody's mind is, I would assume, is the art side of the business as well. So which is also part of our Create side. Now, again, I should probably frame it in a way that we are on the very high-end spec of the capabilities that we do on art. There are plenty of ways to look at this in terms of what we do on that front. And fundamentally, we've gone through it. I'll share a bit more details about the mapping we've done. But fundamentally, if I oversimplify, I'm very close, and I'm using myself as I could probably graduate now as a prompt engineer, but in terms of Stability AI, Stable Diffusion, in terms of Midjourney, in terms of DALL-E 2, all of our teams are really playing with it at Angst as well. I'll come back because we want to do that responsibly with our publishers. Many are not allowing us actually to embed that into the production setup itself, but at least on our own proprietary data, on our own internal workflows, we see that as an incredible, powerful source of inspiration and of creativity. So it's an idea generation piece. It takes a lot of the clerical work away, some of the work that we don't want to do. We really want to focus, again, shortage of resource, how to make sure that humans can really focus on what they do best. More specifically, if I double click on art again, I have it right here. We've done the analysis service line per service line. And if you double click on art, you have roughly 10 components that we work on, from concept art, visual development, all the way to 2D animation, 3D animation, 3D props, environment, VFX, lighting, all the way to world building. So we've been mapping in each of those. What do we think that current LLMs, and we've been comparing many of those as well, what about the current players that are in the market, mapping them by 1, 2, 3, who are the most advanced in that space right now? What is the percentage increase in asset throughput that you could get through those? So how can we be more efficient along those lines? So we're mapping that out. I don't know, world building, if I pick on one of those, we invited last year as well at one of our summit with the executive team, the teams at KantanAI. Very impressive, by the way, if you get a chance to look at what they can do in terms of workflows and world building. we want to be on the leading edge of that. And the truth is, we've done a mapping of roughly 280 players in the space overall across all the service lines. There's probably 80% that will disappear, but we see it part of our job when you think about art or about each of the service lines to help our clients navigate through that and to know which ones are the winners, and it's not just a winner takes it all, it's which ones can do which kind of specific element to it as well. So that's an element on which I think we can generate a lot of value. I'll take one more example on art, which is there's a lot of talks about NPC, non-playable characters. One of the issues we have right now is many of our clients have been asking us for a long time to do way more NPCs. The problem is like the budget didn't help unlock more than maybe 10, 20 per game if you are lucky. Those take a heck of a lot of time to design, often are quite monotonous in the way they can be. I'm very excited about it. The team is very excited about that as well. All of a sudden, what if you could have hundreds of NPCs, thousands of NPCs in the game? The quality of the game would be way more interesting, way more relevant, way more dynamic as part of that. That's why we want to use technology to be able to unlock that to the next level. And finally, a reality check as well. It's like at the end of the day right now, when we look at it, we are also to keep ourselves honest of what works, what doesn't work. When you look at 2D basic technology, we're getting there, making a lot of progress where technology can help. We are nowhere near where we want to be in terms of the type of aspiration we have in terms of 3D right now. So it's also will have to evolve where the technology can do, what's the compute power that is behind, and then on all of that. So that's one example. And we did the same on voice. Voice is, of course, an important part. It's a smaller piece of our business. But there we've looked at 7, 8 technology. We're mapping all of those. We're looking at those. You have a very different pyramid of the top of the pyramid on the absolute key artists where all the voice emotions are coming from, where the studios absolutely don't want to sacrifice the quality that you have there. But maybe at the bottom of the pyramid, there is more we can do on that front, and then across each of the service lines. Jon, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, the other thing is, as you mentioned, whilst a lot of this technology is very impressive, it's still a long way in many cases from being able to apply effectively within the game space. And probably the best example, and a lot of this is industry specific, but probably the best example is machine translation. That's been around forever. But we've been trialing ChatGPT alongside our own KantanAI, and it's nowhere near the quality because it's running off of generic data sets. And very often the language in games it's genre specifics, it's game specific, and you need to build those in-game data sets in order to do effective machine translation. One example one of the team gave me yesterday was in Pokemon, there are something like 4,000 battle moves that are specific language to the Pokemon game, and we've got those translated into 35 language in our data sets. That kind of industry specific nuance is really important to understand as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. No, it's super helpful insights and examples. So thank you for that. That really brings it to life. I guess the obvious follow-on question, in which I've sort of had in a couple of different ways from people on the call, is about what this might mean for the economics of the business. Because I guess the obvious bear case that people would throw up is that the business's main revenue model is obviously charging for time and materials. If less time is needed for the same job, does that mean that revenues fall? You've sort of touched a little bit on the fact that we think that this could just open up more avenues, but it'd be good to kind of dig into that. I guess if that is a concern, should we think about alternative revenue models that the business could deploy? And I guess the other one that comes through, Jon, is on if it costs less to produce a game, will that lead to some sort of deflation of game pricing? And therefore, what could the knock-on impacts of that be? Or on the flip side, do we just think that these are enablers, which will mean an awful lot more content gets produced? So just to kind of dig into those points, and I can repeat them if that was too many in one go.
No, that's fine. I'll try. If I forget one, tell me. But look, on the latter point, as Bertrand said at the start, the biggest challenge we've got as an industry today is games have got so big and so complex that they've got very, very costly. They're incredibly difficult to deliver against, and we simply don't have the human talent in order to keep up with that pace of content. So I don't believe that there's going to be deflation. I think this is going to allow publishers to do more with the assets that they've got. I think it will allow them to create the games they want to create, and it will allow them to provide better and better content for the players. And we're very lucky that we're fortunate to be in an industry where it is a race to the top. Everybody wants to ensure they're providing the best experience to their players and unlocking and harnessing all of the technology available to them, as well as the human horsepower, to be able to do that. So I personally don't believe that we'll see inflation. I think we'll see an explosion in content. I think this will be the next step change in the power and the capabilities of games, and that I think we all find incredibly exciting. Talking about the economics, there's no doubt at all that the way that we evolve and provide our services is going to change. It has changed over the last 10 years. It's going to change again over the next 5 years as we incorporate more technology into the way that we're deploying our services. And in some cases, I think that will result in the cost to serve coming down. But I think it needs to come down. It needs to come down so that we can develop the games further. It needs to come down so that we can take on that next wave of complexity in terms of games. So, and as I said, this is an issue that the industry has always been struggling with. If you look at just a few of the examples that we've talked about today, and just looking at the economics there, taking Kantan in the localization space, there are really two components to that product. One is the Kantan Stream, which is really an incredibly good productivity tool for us. It means that we're able to take on engagements like Microsoft at volume and scale that we could have not done before. And if you look at it from a productivity perspective, we've looked at what we're doing today when we've got 6 project managers effectively managing that assignment with Microsoft. If we had not had Kantan Stream and we tried to replicate that with, if you like, the old way of working, we think there would have been at least 20 plus in terms of project managers. Those are project managers in our cost base that we would have needed to have in order to handle that type of work. If you then look at the machine translation aspects, and we're not actually utilizing machine translation very often with our clients, if you look at that aspect, effectively over time, as we're able to incorporate machine translation into the way that we're translating games, we're going to gradually reduce the amount of freelance linguist costs that it takes to translate the games. And that's effectively a pass-through cost. It comes into us and we pass it on to our customers. So if you take that together and just look at the economics of that service line, yes, I think the cost to serve will come down, but that not at the expense of profitability. I think we'll be able to maintain our profitability, but at the same time be able to take on increasing volume and keep increasing scale. And if you look at it from a publisher perspective, if we're able to reduce the cost to serve for them, then they'll be able to open up their games to other languages that are currently cost prohibitive and allow them to access markets that they're not able to access, and access new players they can't access today because it's unaffordable to translate the games. Very similar dynamic if you look at help, shift and player support. If you're a customer support manager, you're running a contact center, your two key KPIs in that service. One is CSAT scores, so customer experience, customer service, and the other one's cost. And there's always a tension between those two KPIs. What we're able to do with Help Shift, when we combine it with our contact center capability, is we're able to take a budget and effectively over time automate and move some of the lower level queries away from people using the machine, where we're able to do that at better margins, and over time reduce the amount of costs that we have on the human side of the business, which are lower margins, and together that again a lower cost to serve for the customer, but it will also allow them to unlock budgets to then put back into the customer service, the VIP, the white label, and it also allows us to unlock capacity in our business. When you then combine that with something like Kantan, one of the biggest costs is when you have to deal with the complexity of multi-languages within call centres. Using Kantan enables our English-speaking contact centres to interact with players from many countries, and you reduce that cost of having that human support capability. So again, that's an example where I think that will drive down the cost to serve, but it will enable us to maintain our profitability and be able to scale and take on more. The last one, Mighty Games, that we talked about, I think that one's a bit earlier on that one, but we think this can be a fantastic advantage because we'll be able to start offering this service far earlier in the development process. At the moment, we wait for a game to be almost finished and then it gets handed to us and we use our teams of people to test that game. By using something like Mighty Games, we'll be able to embed that technology far earlier in the process. It will allow a much better quality of code to come out at the end of it because development teams, our own and our publishers, will be able to fix bugs in real time so that when it comes to the quality testing piece at the end, we'll be able to focus the people on the most important aspects of the game, which is finding the fun or making sure that the game has the right load balancing, making sure that it's not too easy or it's not too hard. That's what really differentiates the quality of the game. And that's something that the computers just can't get to. And as I said, at the moment, because games are so complex, publishers are having to make compromises about how they test the game. There's always a tension between how long do you test it, and this will allow them to get a lot more coverage and a lot more value, if you like, from the investment that they're putting into the testing exercise. So I think, as I said, it's no doubt it's going to change our business. I think it will also unlock opportunities for us. Bertrand spoke earlier about our ability to be an aggregator. We're in a pretty unique position with 4,000 technologists that are intimate with engines. They understand the technology to be able to support our customers, our clients, our publishers in embracing some of these technologies. And that's why, at the last CMD, this isn't really new for us. We identified technology as being one of our most important sort of strategic planks for the next phase of the development of Keywords. And that's why when we talk about our 15% margin target, myself and Bertrand were so keen that we kept enough headroom to be able to continue to invest in technology so that we're future-proofing our business and making sure that we've got the right skill sets, the right tools to be able to support our clients.
And Nick, just to add one extra element of dimension to this as well, you can sense there is also, to some extent, some strategy choice we're making as well. There are some areas where we're even going to deliberately decide to go on areas where we could just defend. On the contrary, we're going to go on the offense on that, even if there's some cannibalization risk. Upship will be an example. But you can sense we generally believe that the proposition holistically makes it way more compelling, way more competitive as well. There's in all the examples that Jon was describing. There's the other element that we probably don't discuss enough, which is, again, back to a race to the top. There's a lot of incrementality as well to be going after. The example of KantanAI, I hope brings it to life. Those are volumes that none of us could take before. That move from fixed cost to variable cost is something on which we need to be ready. That's why Jon and I have been talking a lot about building our platform as well, to be ready to take that on if you take a longer term horizon on this. I think take areas like community management. We haven't talked about it today, but there's a ton in terms of the more those games get complex, the more there is risk of sentiment analysis, toxicity management, and others that is really important GDPR compliance to be able to manage. Those are incremental businesses on the back of it. And I'll add one more, which we don't talk much about because we're very focused on game here, but think about the capabilities of 4,000 technology experts in Create. Think about what this can do in virtual production. We've hinted to that at some of the most recent results. Those production flows are very outdated in a way. It's very pre-visualizations, production, green screen at best, post-production, a lot of back and forth, not necessarily the best playing acting experience as well. I think many are starting to wonder about how can real-time technology, Unreal Engine in particular, 5.2 is already there. You know that we've done quite a bit of prototyping around those lines. It's a topic of discussion that I'm having with the team next week. Those are purely incremental areas of businesses as well on which we want to be ready to make the move on as well. Technology will be a big part of the answer for that.
No, that's a really thorough answer. Thank you, guys. And actually, I guess one that maybe that I also get as a question and kind of sort of slightly plays into the point you just made about the fixed to variable cost dynamic, which we know has been a tailwind for outsourcing and continues to be so. Well, one of the questions I get on the AI side is that if there is this sort of technology solution that can be deployed by game developers themselves, will that not lead to them being more inclined to take some services back in-house? Just be worth exploring that, I think.
I think that's a great one because I've heard that many times, and I understand the question totally logically, right? To some extent, why couldn't you then do it yourself? But I think there's a lot of misconception there on that front. And again, that's maybe where we operate. And that's why I always fight against the word of we're just an outsourcer at arm's length, do a bit of work here on the side when we are short on resource. That's not what we do. At the core of it, we do co-development. We have platform to be able to very quickly do porting across multiple platforms, multiple language, and then engage to effectively get in front of players. So take co-development, for example. I don't know, examples like Epic, Fortnite. We've shared that we've been joined at the hip with Epic on Fortnite for the last 6 years. I think that there's even some areas where you wouldn't even know who is from Keywords, who is from the publishers as part of it. That's exactly how we want to have it. So part of our job would also to be able to help publishers as we get the vantage point of seeing across the industry to help navigate through that. We'll be all in for that. Go back in time, and Jon touched on it as well, from Unreal 1 to Unreal 5, those engines are more and more complex, and you could expect exactly the same question, saying, well, they're more and more codeless to some extent. More and more is drag and drop. You have the digital asset management behind, you have the assets that are there, create your world actually in the 3 clicks. Guess what? It has only created way more demand, way more sophistication. It creates other types that people underestimate. I think more complexity, more full-on rewarding games means also more load balancing. It also means that you need the right cloud infrastructure that is probably properly tempered to be able to take that. You have network resilience that needs to be taken care of. You need workflows that are way more complex to get multiple parties to be able to interact on that front. So I think being a partner of record, being a trusted partner at the hip is a massive, massive advantage on that front. I think I only see it that way. I see it as an extra, a really hockey stick piece, but an extra tool on which adding complexity plays to our will. That's what we do. That's why if you go back to strategy to some extent, and even beyond technology, that's why if you remember the 5 work stream, we're investing into One Keywords to make sure that we share all the best practices across our studios, that we have center of excellence around innovation. The labs are fully in place right now, that we have those sessions that we have next week. That's why we invest into the academies as well, to in partnership, by the way, with Unreal, in partnership with Unity and others of this world, to make sure that we can effectively train the next generation to the type of specs that we need. That's why we use M&A as well in some place. Helpshift was an example of that. Mighty was an example of that. That's why we are spending time on building strategic partnership with our clients, so that, again, we're truly at the table being able to take those big questions. There are many questions that even we didn't anticipate when I started. There are some partners asking us, with all the complexity, how can you help us get our proprietary engine to work on mobile, for example, as part of it? Those are, we have the army to be able to take that on, I would say. So, and stepping back from all of it as well, if you really, really step back from this, and that's why we always talk about the platform, we're still only 6% of that market, of 12 billion of externalized provision, growing quite fast. So again, that's where technology comes in to be able to take much, much more of the load as an industry, and clearly we intend to be a big part of that.
I mean, sorry, Jon. I'll just give one example. Kantan localization. You know, we are the experts in providing what is an incredibly complex process, taking 35 language across multiple titles, training the AI to make sure that it's translating the words in an effective way, interfacing 700 freelancers. You know, that we're solving for a complex problem. It's a complex process that our customers are charging with. All we're now talking about is more sophisticated tools to actually do that translation piece, but it's the process that we're effectively providing a service for. So I think that's also something that we're very conscious of, hence developing the Kantan Stream platform that makes that process a lot more smooth for the customers.
No, definitely. And just to pick up on, you know, Bertrand, you touched on Unreal there, and I mentioned it a couple of times. And I think there's a very good observation that you just made there. But maybe just to build on that a tiny bit in terms of, again, one gets a lot of questions about, you know, the ease with which the game engines like Unreal are making it possible to create content, automate certain processes, etc. Just to kind of build on that point a little bit in terms of, you know, why you don't see that as a threat, why it's more of an opportunity.
I mean, absolutely, it is the right question, right? But that's why I'm going a little bit back in time, and maybe I'm going back into our own organization. If I bring you in, it's like, again, take Epic, take Fortnite, for example. The team working on their high voltage with more than 100 developers. I think we have 4 or 5 studios, Jon, working very closely overall with Epic in different capacity on that front. Often the advantage that maybe we see it as an extension or as a separate entity as Keywords. Often what you may not see is, like, we often get access 12 to 18 months before we're the case. Before, when we were still on Unreal 5, Unreal 4, we had actually access 18 months before to the technology stack that is behind. Some even ask us, for example, I'll take a very simple example. Hauck joined us overnight. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. One of the founders of Hauck has been since Unreal 4, the early days of it, on the advisory board of Epic as part of it. So you need a lot of trust for that. But that means that how can you help understand it? How can you help develop the engine in its own right? How can you then help? We're probably one of the biggest partners on record working with Epic. If you take it in abstract terms across all of our studios as part of it, there's a lot of knowledge there to use it properly. There's a lot of knowledge to do the load balancing properly. There's a lot of knowledge that is needed to make sure that you use it with the right performance type of setups that are behind. Again, the cloud infrastructure is behind end-to-end. So I think there's probably way more to the eye than this. I relish the fact that Gen AI coming in, the complexity that is going to come in. Let me make it even more concrete and early days on that, but extracting a little bit from Unreal. I've had a few discussions recently with some pretty big name CTOs of big publishers. I spent a bit of time as well with the founder of Stability AI. As you see, we've been mapping, we mentioned earlier, 280 partners as well into that setup. And actually, interesting feedback I got on the 2-hour sessions with one of the CTOs was, well, Keywords, how can you help us? We have plenty of slice of verticals. And we're going to probably use quite a few of those. We don't know which are the 80% that is going to be flushed out. We don't know which ones are the ones that are going to make it to the top. It's not going to be just one. It's going to be a bit of this for this type of application. Maybe there will be a bit more of stable diffusion for this type of application or this type of use case. How could you, Keywords, as you get the vantage point, being able to be more the horizontal play on top of that? How could you be more the aggregator that comes on top of it? Is there an API layer that you could help us to help navigate and easily, instead of having to log in, log out, having different type of use case all over the place that don't talk to each other, could you play a role there? I'm not promising there, I don't know. I find that very intriguing, but I like the fact that it gives you an insight that our partners are thinking along those lines. Another characteristic that we shared on Kantan is like, we're also willing to co-invest in some of those to build those properly. So it's not just, here's a product. The best case to me are partners with whom, and with a few of, how are you willing to put sweat equities to invest in the product so it's really fit for purpose for the industry in its own right? That's what we are good at. That's much harder for some competitors who are much smaller on the tail to effectively take that on. That's where you need a strategic partnership. That's where you need the trust, that you need studios who have been embedded with our partners as well for quite a bit of time. So on us to play those cards properly, yeah? But again, take an example like that Jon took on Mighty Games. The first port of call, it's such an advantage to be able to use that across the 24 create studios we have in DevQA. That's what we do. We already do it today. And then as part of co-development, you can then start embedding that with our clients on the back of that. The only caveat I would put on all this is we can easily get overly, I'm excited about it, I'm passionate about it, but there is also a reality check, which is we want to do that with clients in a responsible way. There are plenty of questions as well that will come up, IP and others, I'm sure we'll touch on it. But also, how do we do that at the right pace with our clients, guiding them? But we have a key role to play there. So I don't think it's a role of taking internally or you don't need us for that. On the contrary, it's really one team where we have a history. If you go back to each of our studios and the one we've acquired and will acquire, or the way that we set up our team and the spirit and the strategic partnership, is really a collaboration exercise there.
Yeah, no, well, that's a good segue, and I'm conscious we've run over time. Just a couple more questions, if you don't mind. But yeah, exactly. Let's just touch on that point about sort of industry adoption. So you just talked about you know, that the conversations you're having with publishers, etc. And I guess we're all aware and reading a lot about the potential kind of risks around use of AI tools and, you know, confidentiality and IP risks and that sort of thing. So yeah, just be interesting to touch on some of the barriers that you think there are, as well as the reasons for adoption.
Yeah, I see. It's a great one, because that brings us back down as well to some of the limitations to the faster acceleration for that. And I think, by the way, that those things always take more. I mean, from history as well of having gone through digital transformation, those things also. I think this one is real. It's really tangible. As much as we've seen the tech evolution in there, we absolutely want to adapt it, but it takes more time than many people think as well to truly materialize. The three biggest barriers that I see, and that I hope as an industry we can take on together in a responsible way, to me, top of the list would be the IP royalties rights. We have explicitly some publishers asking us right now not to use Gen AI in particular until we understand better. From a black box point of view, from an IP point of view, you wouldn't want to have a character that is being embedded into another game influenced by another character from another piece. You get into a world of pain in terms of royalty and IP protection on the back of that. I can totally understand that. This being said, the exercise we're doing within Keywords is how can we separate what is internal processes, where we can automate much more, all the things so that at least we can learn, we can get to it. How do we really get the scars in our body, but respectfully with our clients as well when it gets to assets that effectively make it to production. There's plenty of questions from a legal and ethical point of view that are going to come up. You talked about voice acting earlier today as well. I also want to be respectful there. There are legal questions you might have seen a couple of days ago, if I'm not mistaken, Spotify taking all sort of tracks that have been generated out of the platform itself. You might have seen, if I'm not mistaken, Getty Images as well, suing quite a few of the LLM platforms as well, beyond to take some of their assets out of the consideration of the data set. And the third one to me is data. And I don't think we talk enough about data in all the debates. At the end of the day, we talk about LLMs. We're definitely going to embed that. You can sense we're already building the right plugins to be able to take that on properly. But I think it's going to be an evolution. I'm a big fan of less quality, maybe in the short term, but super high quality, industry specific. That's what we do. That's what we're good at. I've gone through that quite extensively at Novartis as well, where there's some data that was proprietary to us, and there's some data that sits on each of the nodes that belongs to our clients or to the healthcare systems, likewise here with the publishers. But there are plenty of smart ways and bad ways to do that. So how do we do that smartly together? How do we do the right tokenization so that our engines can effectively learn from those? Our teams are pretty good at that. How do we do that uber transparently with our partners so that we effectively take the full benefit of it? And I think Jon shared a couple of examples where you can sense we're thinking about data. Where do we have data so that maybe they're smaller models, SLM to some extent, but then with the add-in as GPT-4 moves to 5, moves to 6, November, next iterations, how can we embed that more and more when it's also efficient? So it's also, how do we sequence that properly? How do we do that responsibly across our industry? But to me, those would be three big barriers that we'll need to overcome together. And maybe that may also bring a good reality check as well when we look at that through that lens.
Really helpful. Perfect. Moving towards wrap up, but I guess just sort of kind of a bit of a catch-all, sort of looking into the future. Sort of just maybe one talking about possibly touching on today's acquisition and acquisitions, which have obviously always been a key part of the business going forward to harness all things technology and AI that we've touched on, and then maybe just sort of thinking about the business as a whole, sort of gazing into the crystal ball, sort of how you think you'd like the business to look in a couple of years' time, when you think about the way the industry has evolved and how you see it evolving, and what you would like the business to look like as that evolution happens. That would be a useful way to wrap up, I think.
Yeah, good. I'll keep a minute at the end, but maybe I'll touch on maybe one thing I wanted to shed to your question, Nick, and maybe Jon, if you want to share a few words about How to Lab, we're clearly excited about that.
Perfect.
But maybe one thing that's important that we haven't touched on in there, and that will be part of the next 5 years, and actually, quite frankly, it's now. This is today. This is how we see a business. First of all, I think we're way more technology that probably people see to the eye, and some of the notes I've seen on that front. So I hope this helps bring it a little bit to life. But frankly, 50% of the answer will be, you can sense we're passionate about technology, we're passionate about the combination of technology and talent and building the right solution for our partners to scale it across and to build our platform. But 50% of the equation is about leadership. 50% of the equation to me is about the culture we're going to create. But I think the worst thing we could do is to just defend that we're going to defend because we're big. We're definitely going to take advantage of our size, but we need the right agility to be able to do that. That's why one of the things I'm most proud of at Keywords is that there is a huge agility, there's a huge entrepreneurship in it. It still feels very small. It feels like a network of entrepreneurs that drives incredibly fast. I'm proud of how the team has been embracing that, not just over the last few months, not just over the last 18 months, but also the tech savviness across it. I think I'm proud as well of the way that Exco has been, we've reshaped Exco as well accordingly. The examples we took on today, just to go on those, take Kantan came again from our head of localizations in partnership with the Kantan team. They deserve the credit for saying, look, how can we think differently about that? Think about Mighty, equally came from our head of testing and head of create of saying, look, how do we think very differently about that proposition? Helpshift came completely from Fred, Tony, and the team on the engage side of saying we need to think very differently about that proposition and how do we think about a proper solution there. It's not just that team, and I think we've also self-selected service line directors who naturally are tech-minded as part of it. So to me, everything starts from curiosity, starts from really being passionate about that, but grounded into real solutions for clients. So it's not tech for tech. It's also how do you do that properly? Having those two sides of the brain will be key. Again, I want to reemphasize we have a team of 4,000 technologists at the core. At the end of the day, we have a platform as well that we have behind. We are clearly thinking about data, as you can sense. And again, we want to do that responsibly with clients. So when you think about the long term on 5 years, plenty of exciting things. I talked earlier about virtual production. I talked about some of the, I think a lot of incremental that will come our way. We have a lot of bread and butter to get right as well, and executing on that relentlessly as well as part of that. But ultimately, it's really about leadership to be able to really take the lead in that space for the next 5 years. Jon, you want to just comment on Hardsuit?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously delighted to welcome the team from Hardsuit into the business. You know, as we said before, it's we've been focusing on 4 key areas within the M&A. It's very focused, game development, marketing, and building out our capabilities there. Technology, we spend a lot of our time talking about technology. We will look at relevant technology and assess whether it's appropriate to bring it into the business or whether we just utilize it as we do many other technologies. And then finally, adjacent markets. And, you know, Hardsuit is right in that sweet spot. It's a high quality studio operating on AAA titles in that AAA space. It's also quite nice. It's based in Seattle. Obviously, that's a bit of a hub for the gaming industry, but it's actually our first game development business in that area, so that gives us another access to a talent pool. So we're super excited to bring them into the team and looking forward to working with them.
And Nick, maybe a last word on my side, if I may, which is
absolutely, yeah.
On that front, a step back from everything, hopefully, that we discussed today, and I'm sure there will be many more healthy debates as well. But what my North Star, Jon, myself, the team is 3 times the size of the next one, but still only 6%. So you can sense the obsession of building a platform. I hope that we have a strong strategy. We're executing on it. Today, what we wanted to convey is that technology is a core piece of that. I think we've accelerated over the last 18 months. In particular, it's not just technology, it's technology and talent. It's really solution that we're building together. I hope that brings it a little bit more to life. Again, I'm coming back of we're going to double the size of the business, but not just by doubling the size of the headcount. This is a moment for us. This is a massive opportunity for us. And I think that scale combined with agility is a winning formula, and that's on us, on leadership, to take that on. My only invitation, and certainly our job, Jon and myself, my only invitation to everyone on the call is also that we tend to talk directly a lot about the risk associated to technology as part of it. I don't know, I've lived also in a world where it opens up incredible opportunities, and that's the lens that we look at it, and we really want to be in position to be able to take those on. So on that note, I just wanted to also to thank everybody as well on the call for joining us. I know those are strong topics where there's a lot to figure out as part of it. As you can sense, we want to lead in that space, and I wanted to say a special thank you as well for many of you who have been with us on that journey for quite some time. I've seen that evolution the last decade already. So I look forward to the next 10.
Well, thank you, Bertrand. Thank you, Jon. We covered an enormous amount of ground on what is a big topic, but you know, I think we've addressed it in a really effective way. So apologies to you and to everyone that we've run over, but I'm not altogether surprised given how much ground we had to cover. But thanks very much for your time and for everyone for joining the call, and we'll leave it there.